Afternoon, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed your lunch. So first session after lunch, it's always a bit sleepy, but let's see if we can wake you up and excite you a little bit today. What we're going to do, myself, Steve from Immuta here, we're going to talk to you a little bit about how we manage to scale our data mesh with the help of Immuta, with the help of policies as code, and how that fits into the principle of computational governance, federated computational governance, one of the principles of data mesh. So just those of you who don't know, Roche, quickly, Swiss pharma diagnostics company, 125-year history. We make a little bit of money, of course. Maybe we made more money last year during the pandemic than we do this year, but still with global employees all over the world. So myself, I am Paul Rankin, and we are working within the IT function. It's the global IT function. And essentially what I'm responsible for is the data mesh platform, the implementation of data mesh, the adoption of the culture, adoption of ownership, domain ownership, essentially as this data product concept evolves. Now, we've been, on this journey for a few years now at Roche. It started, way back in 2020, probably now. We had all the same problems that you probably have in your organizations. We have monolithic data warehouse or multiple monolithic data warehouses. We have, really, really slow release cycles. When you did release, you'd be lucky if it didn't break anything. Brian here from the business over here, Brian will testify that this still happens, Brian, yeah? In some areas of Roche. So, we needed to rethink our analytics in Roche, and just by moving it to the cloud clearly was not going to cut it. And this is a quote from our good friend Albert Einstein. My boss Omar Kivaja, who is also supposed to be here today, he loves this quote. Basically, just by doing the same thing over again and expecting different results is just, it's not going to happen. And this is exactly what would have happened. Yes, it might have given you a little bit more unlimited storage, unlimited compute if you move to the cloud, but essentially it wasn't going to change anything. You're going to still have a huge bottleneck. You're still going to have your ingestion team, your modeling team, your data mart team, your reporting team, all segregated. It's still going to give you the same problems. Yeah. So we, I'm not going to go into data mesh too much. I'm sure you're actually sick of hearing what data mesh is, and by now it's now kind of, a lot of people are trying to adopt this. It's not a new approach. It's not revolutionary. It's just got a little bit more framework around it. A little bit, people start to understand what it means to be, a data product owner. Domain ownership itself is a big thing. That's more on the social side, and I think that people are learning now how to implement it and what works and what doesn't work. And, clearly it doesn't work for everyone. And what we're going to show you today is what works for us, for Roche, around the fourth pillar of computational governance. So just on that journey, I just want to explain that dip to you, because that's quite important, that it explains to you where we are today. So yes, we started, 2020. We had some very good, uplift at the beginning. Alliances with the business really took off. People were really interested in this concept of decentralization, this federation of their data. And, it comes to a point where it's like a snowball effect. People see the results, then they want to get involved, and more areas of the business want to get involved. And we have, last year, over 300 data products, 100 odd data product teams, really embracing this data product. It's, it's kind of opening the door now to innovation. It's really accelerating the journey of onboarding, discovering, and really publishing and reusing data, unlocking data, right? But what happens is if you don't focus on the governance, of this, and especially the federated part, if you try just to federate all your governance and say, okay, it's federated governance, you do data product teams or domains, do what you want, it just becomes complete chaos. And if you don't have this, the good balance of, I suppose, centralized governance and processes in place, but also decentralized teams that are enabling their access control, they're enabling how they want to deliver their data, then it's just absolute chaos. And because now the governance side is kind of in Roche being a little bit behind the curve, we now get to a point where the data quality is starting to suffer a little bit. Because what happens if you don't have these governance policies in place, if people don't own this, if they don't play their part in the whole of the data mesh, then clearly people will not trust their data products. And if they're not looking after data products, people will not trust them, so they won't use them. So what will they do? They'll just build their own data product. And then the whole silo effect becomes worse, absolutely worse than before. Now, we're here today and we're fixing this problem. And a lot of it is about education, about data literacy. It's about what it means to be a good data citizen, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just kind of to show you where we are. Clearly, the North Star is a fully trusted central nervous system, of data mesh to reuse data products across the industry. Yeah. And we will definitely get there. Clearly there's some things that we're learning as we go, we want to iron out. But where we presented last year, I suppose we were still on the number 2, session. We were just on, everybody was excited about it. People were onboarding different parts of the business. And now we learn a lot in the last year and we are here. So just shows you. But for today, federated computational governance. What does it mean? This is what the book says, on data mesh. And you can see what it really highlights is you have this overarching central federated team of compliance experts, security experts that are setting the standards and the processes, because you need those to distribute collaboration. But you see at the bottom that things like local policies, access control, these things need to be embedded in the data product from the design stage early on. It's not an afterthought. These guys really they don't want to be too worried about working out how they do it, but they need to build in these federated policies and this governance into their data product. And this is where we come in as a platform team. We build these computational programs, these computational parts to allow the data product teams just to plug in as a service, if you like. And we'll talk about that later, this example of as a service, a governance as a service. Actually, what does governance mean? And I like this slide because, you think, going back to the word governance, it was a Greek verb originally, meaning it was Kubernean, I think was the meaning it came from originally. And this meant to guide and steer. And in the old days, it was meant to guide and steer a ship. Think of the sailing. You guide the ship over through the rocks and whatever. And this was the original meaning. Now, we've kind of moved from that all the way, in IT, certainly, to rule with authority. This is the way it should be done. If you don't, you will spend the rest of your life in jail, blah, 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 etc. So, we need to get back to somewhere in between, that we have this, yes, there is clearly regulations, compliance issues that we need to get right at the top, these global governance standards, but we need to allow the innovation to happen federated in the data product teams, the people that understand the data, the people that know who needs to access the data with managed risk. And this is the key, and certainly in Roche, we try to eliminate all risk, Now, it's in the case, some cases, you need to apply more risk than others, and less risk in obviously some of the high value use cases. But we need to strike the balance. That is the message here that we're talking about. Now, moving to a federated governance approach does require a change in organization. There's no getting away from this. And this is, I suppose, the most difficult thing. We need to move from this central IT governance, where you have this central governance body at the top with your domain teams, your data science teams, your reporting, to this more federated governance model. Yes, you have this cross-domain governance that's setting the standards, the global policies, the way that they want to govern their data mesh. But then you have this domain governance, this federated governance, that they want to apply it specifically for their particular use cases, for their particular business area, which may be completely different depending on the use case or the domain. And we need to allow this to happen so these people or these teams can innovate and evolve and get the most out of their data without being tied up, with this bureaucracy. And also the technical part, we don't expect them to be able to work it out. How do they do this in a computational way? That is our job from an IT, from a central platform team. We offer that as a service. And I keep telling them about the service. I'll show you exactly what it means in a minute. So moving, again, not just on the social side, but obviously on the technical side, and moving from the centralized data warehouse, that approach, moving towards this domain ownership, and that every domain, every data product, the infrastructure, the policies, the code, everything is packaged up in this data product. Okay. Now, clearly, there is some challenges with this. With federated governance, federating trust. An organization has to federate the trust as well. It's key. You have to expect the guys to play their part. You have to ensure they know what they're doing. You have to give them guidance. And I think that this is a key role. And this is where I was in a discussion there about, a chief data officer. In the past, they would be responsible for all our data assets in a company. But now their role and their team is evolving to more of this, this guidance, if you like. They have to, I suppose, offer this expertise on how to be good data citizens. They have to offer the expertise on what it means to be a data owner, and the responsibilities that they need to take on. So yes, in saying that, in Roche, and I mentioned this in a panel discussion, we don't actually have a CDO in Roche at all. We expect everyone to play their part. Everyone should be a good data citizen. Everyone should be a good data professional. Yeah, not one person should now be responsible for this in an organization. This has a discussion of its own, and it can go on for a very long time. Anyway, striking the balance, I've already said. Yep, you need to strike this balance. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Steve. Not yet. You're right, Steve. Hold on. This is what I mean as a service. Yeah, this just shows the service. So you think of a service. This is an example of a service. As a data steward, I need to limit access to data for certain users. Quite a normal request. Yeah, you would say. We as a platform team, we take this services at the top. We extract these from the infrastructure, from the technical, from the tools, from the vendors, from the capabilities. All we talk to are about the users. Yeah. I mean, we've summarized the users there into 3 high-level summaries: producers, consumers, and stewards. But clearly, under them are different types of users, like developers, like data product owners, domain leads, etc., etc. And every one of those personas needs a number of services from the platform. Yep, and we treat the platform as a product, no different from any product. And what services do our consumers, our producers, our stewards, so our personas, our stakeholders, if you like, as a grouping, what do they expect? What do they want from our platform? This is just one of them, an example. And if you keep this in mind, we'll take you through how this example works. But I just wanted to get that in your head first. So how we set ourselves up in our platform, essentially another one of our services. I'm a data product team. I need to be set up for access, for development. I need a space to innovate. Yep. They get 3 roles. Yep, as a team: an admin, a developer, a reporting role. Now, here we go. Here's the interesting part. This is how it used to work. Yeah. What happened was, these roles and users for data products became more and more, and then we started having thousands. So initially we said we want a reporting role for every data product. And in Snowflake, we do this on schema level. Yep. So we say a data product must live in a schema, must have a role, and then you can imagine, thousands of data products, thousands and thousands of different roles, and soon it just becomes unmanageable. Yeah, the central identity management team crumbles because you're sending requests to them every hour to create roles, and your roles just go boom, 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 boom. So it works. Don't get me wrong, it does work. but it's a nightmare to maintain. You have thousands of roles with probably, a limited number of users at the end of the day. So, and this is called role-based access control, and we knew that there must be a better way to do this. So the graph below shows you the number of reporting roles go up, but obviously the admin and the developer roles kind of stay the same. So we asked Immuta to help, and this is where Steve will come and explain a little bit how Immuta, helped.
Thank you, Paul. So Paul's being a little modest. I think the Roche implementation of this is probably one of the furthest along data meshes we've seen at Immuta. I'm Steve Tao, CTO at Immuta. I'm going to dive into a little bit of the technical details on how we help solve this problem of managing the access controls in the data mesh and the federated governance piece. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This is just a slide depicting that it is possible to also present your data products in a way that respects federated governance policy. So I'm showing some screenshots of Immuta here. This could also be exposed as an API in your own custom UI that does this as well, which is in fact what Roche is doing. And when you build a policy, and I'll talk about how these policies work in a second, you don't just want that policy to impact what the users can actually see in Snowflake, but it should also impact what they're able to see in your so-called marketplace for your data products. So where they can discover the data products, subscribe to them. You want the policies to be enforced in both places. So it's important to be able to publish this metadata in a way that is exposed to the users so they can discover the data products, understand what they're subscribing to, and again, your policies are reflected as part of what they can actually see and subscribe to. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on the data portal piece. This is the bigger piece, which is the two-layered federated governance. So a few slides back, Paul had that image from the data mesh book in there where he spoke about global policies and then local policies. So this is that same concept where if you have this kind of, think of it as your big picture compliance group at the top, and they're making all the rules that can't be broken. So a very simple rule might be, I don't want anyone to see any PHI data, unless they're acting under some legitimate purpose, right? So that would be a global rule that you want to always have enforced on your data products. So if a new data product comes into your mesh and then you want to expose that to users, you want this policy to automatically attach to that and enforce it no matter what. So this is actually possible. You can see those little tags there on the database boxes there. So you can actually attach policies based on tags. So if you define your data, and again, the people that are creating the data products know their data best, right? So they can either tag their data with, hey, this is PHI, or this is someone's address, or this is someone's name. And that way these policies can attach to that semantic level rather than at the physical table and column level. And that's really important. That's how you get scale, right? You could build a policy once, and in fact, you could actually automatically discover these tags as well. So we have a capability called sensitive data discovery that can do this, where it can kind of scan your data and say, hey, this looks like a name, this looks like an address, and to automatically tag the data so that if something gets registered later, it can automatically be tagged and the policy is automatically applied, or again, manually tagged. So this semantic layer is very important. I'm going to talk about the user semantic layer in a second here. So then once you have these global standards that apply to all your data products, you want to empower or delegate the trust down to the people that own the data products too. So you need them to be able to augment those policies with their own policies. Like who do they want to gain access to this data? What do they think needs to be masked? And so without a framework to manage this, it becomes very complicated for IT. It becomes a bottleneck at the top there, because every time someone needs to build a domain-specific policy or a local policy, as was depicted in that slide earlier, they need to talk to the people in charge of building the policy. So there'd be some human in the loop that has to manage this. So the idea with a federated governance framework like Immuta is that you empower those teams to build their own rules, and then the framework, Immuta, will manage the merging of those rules to make sure they both get enforced appropriately, based on the wishes of the folks that are building the global policies, but as well as the folks that are building those local domain-specific policies. I'm depicting this in this slide as a database per domain. We didn't really talk about this too much. Paul mentioned briefly they're using a schema per domain. You can take that approach as well. But a domain means in this context that this is the database where the data products are being created and stored. And so each of these data product owners can be building their own policies within their domain. So if they build a policy that said, I want to mask, names, let's say, their policies would be scoped to just their domain. So they wouldn't be able to go bump into other stuff outside of their domain. Only the people with the global policy privilege could do that. And that's how the two layers work in concert with one another. So how is this made possible? So we apply what's called an attribute-based access control framework. And this is what I was talking about when I mentioned the semantic layer for your users. So you never actually grant a specific user access to something, a physical table. Instead, you grant based on attributes of a user to that semantic layer of tags on your data. And so this provides you this abstraction to be able to build these rules in a scalable way without having to understand all users in Roche or all physical tables and columns in Roche, right? You've created this abstraction. So when you have those subject attributes means the users, right? So when you have those attributes about your users, and those could come in from like an identity manager, but it could also come from other sources in your organization, like what training courses someone has taken. So you can decorate your users with all the information, and then again, you can tag your data with what it is, and you can build higher level classifications of that too, because you could say things like, hey, if there's a name and address in a table, I want to also classify that as PHI, for example. And so these higher level classifications and roll-ups can be customized as well. And so from those two components, this pyramid, or triangle, if you will, of the subject attributes and resource object attributes, you then can build these policies in a decoupled way. So you're no longer coupling the access decision in a role with the user. If you think about a role, that implies it defines the access along with who's in the role. So this decoupling gives you this more scalable framework for building the policies, so that you can do what I was talking about a second ago. Because they're both working off the same sheet of music, right? They're just referencing these tags and these user attributes when they're building the policies. Okay, so how does this actually work? So as I'm sure some of you are aware, Snowflake has some very powerful governance features built into the Snowflake product. I have that marked here as Snowflake policy, but they can do things like row access policies, dynamic column masking, and of course, everyone's familiar with table grants. So what happens is these data engineers and compliance folks can go into Immuta, and the data engineers would probably be your data product creators, right? They can go into Immuta and register their data products. And as I mentioned, we could discover sensitive data if you want to do that. And they can build these policies. And those policies will get pushed down as native Snowflake controls. So think of it as almost like a Rosetta Stone. You're building these abstract rules like I talked about using the ABAC framework, and then it will translate that down into the actual policies in Snowflake. So one simple rule like mask all PHI from everyone except people acting under a legitimate purpose could end up being hundreds of masking policies across thousands of tables in Snowflake with a one foul swoop of one policy being built. And that would all get administered as Snowflake masking policies. So then the user gains access to these tables by finding a data product and those rules being enacted through Immuta, and they're able to actually query the data live in Snowflake and have these policies be enforced based on what's happening external in that Immuta data portal and policy builder. But one key part I didn't really talk about is that you can also monitor the activity that's happening. So you can see that you can be a little bit more reactive too, rather than proactive, where you can see some things being queried that might be sensitive, and one of those global policy builders could react to that and say, oh, we don't want people querying this kind of data. Let's build a new global policy to take care of that. And again, they could just build that policy and it gets enforced across all the data products. So that's the general gist of it. I have some bullets here to summarize what I just talked about there. So again, ABAC creates this policy standard, if you will. Everyone's working off the same sheet of music to build policies. So you can build these global policies that doesn't require you to know about the physical tables or the physical users. You're again working through these abstractions. And because of that, you can delegate the ownership of these policies, and the data owners can build them. And you work against standard groups and attributes to build these policies. Again, everyone's working out the same sheet of music. And audit, as I mentioned. So I'm going to stop here. We've got a special guest star coming up. Do you want to have Claude come up? Yeah. Okay. So Claude Zwicker, who is in charge of a lot of the technical implementation here, is going to talk about more of the details of how this actually works in Roche.
Part about Claude, I was going to speak to you and tell you how we managed to, reduce 300 roles to one single role. Claude has been here today. Now, Claude has been with us on this journey for the last over 2 years. Claude is from Accenture, one of our implementation partners. So I thought, who better? Claude was the brains and the mastermind behind this particular operation, and he's going to explain to you. And Claude has been that good, that, he is actually maybe... Should I tell?
I'll talk about it myself.
Okay, I'll let you talk about it.
Good. So mic check 1, 2, 3. I hope you can hear me. So surprise appearance, as Paul mentioned. Thanks guys for letting me fill in here. Really, really excited. So you've heard a bit about Roche, the history of Roche. We're doing data mesh as we have said, right? So really what we are trying to do as IT is, our role is to provide the platform, and we want, the data teams in the business to work on that platform. So that's our offering, the platform. And it needs to have as much automation and services so it's attractive, right? Because if you tell a business function, please come onto our platform, they might feel like, I'm going to lose a certain amount of control. So really sort of when we talk about customers, it's internal facing and really want to sell our platform and services. And we've also heard from Steve, right, how Immuta is sort of, helping us apply this concept of federated governance, meaning having, a set of centralized centralized rules, but making sure that these guardrails are being followed by everybody. Now, we're going to go into a very concrete example here, so you really see how we have used this in practice. And I just want to repeat the problem statement for everybody so that we're on the same page. That's very, very important. So one of the questions, and obviously as Accenture, right, we talk to many clients among the industry, and one of these questions that always comes up is, all right, we've understood the concept of data mesh. Data product is usually the one that really resonates well with people. But now, technically, in Snowflake, what is a data product? Yeah, and as Paul mentioned, so when we started out, we said a schema. Yeah, a schema is a data product. And you have seen the slide earlier with these smileys. Yeah, Paul mentioned. So yeah, that will work, but very quickly we ended up with hundreds of schemas because we have hundreds of data products. And the users sort of said, if you're talking to one business, they're using Tableau and then they have like 20 schemas. Yeah, it's not nice. It will work, yeah, but it's not very nice. And we thought, I'm sure we can do this better, and that's where we partner with Immuta. So let's have a look at it. Again, this is how we think about platform, right? Services, capabilities, integrations. That's our offering towards, our colleagues in Roche, and we try to get everybody to join us. Now, the good news is, and that's why I stand here today, is we cracked the problem. Yeah. So, meaning we found a better solution than saying, every schema is a data product. And Immuta, so there was about, I think, September last year, released a new feature, which they call table grants, which is reducing all these complexities of these, hundreds of roles that we had to create. And again, I'll talk about this a bit later. So each time you created a new data product, you would have to, do a ServiceNow ticket. The central platform team creates the schema for you, creates the Snowflake role for you, integrates it with our central identity access management tool. Takes 2 to 3 days usually, yeah? So, again, not nice. But Immuta came with a solution, which they call the table grants feature, and it works, it's a one global policy, which works like a simple mathematical equation, yeah? And I guess all of you have done some math at some point in your life, yeah? So we got left side of the equation, right side of the equation, and the equality sign in the middle. And so how it works at the end of the day, so the left side is the data source. So each table or view, so an object in Snowflake is called a data source in Immuta. On the right hand, we got the user. I am a user, you are a user, human and technical users. And in the middle, we got the global subscription policy. And how it works is that Immuta will grant or push a policy into Snowflake, giving the users access to the table if the tag on the data source matches the attribute on the user, right? So that's very, very important to understand this. So if let's make a concrete example. If Claude, as a user, has an attribute, data product, One Ring sales, this subscription policy will grant me access to all the data sources that are tagged with One Ring sales, right? And if one of the two is not there, there's no access. So that's important to understand. So if Claude has an attribute One Ring sales, but nothing is tagged with it, sure, good for me to have that attribute, but I won't get access. The same way, if we have something tagged on the data source, but the user doesn't have the attribute, it doesn't give access. So that's why I was bringing up this metaphor of the mathematical equation. So this all sounds great, right? So essentially for each data product, we create a tag and an attribute, and that's how we can essentially manage access. And we don't have to think about schema anymore or roles in Snowflake. It's fully automated. But of course, you will now say, sure, you're now selling me here the big solution, yeah? So tell me a bit more about, how these tags get on the data sources and how the attribute gets on the users, yeah? Who's doing that? Is there, someone sitting there magically behind the scenes doing this by hand? No, of course we automate it. So let's look a bit at the solution. So we have, on the one hand side, really the data producers that are doing part of the job, such as a developer, for example. So as part of the development process, they create, and we call it a data product.yaml file. So this is part of the development process. And in that YAML file, you'll find information such as the ID of the data product, the owner, in this case, I've chosen Paul, obviously a description, and many other things. But very important, you will declare which objects belong to that data product. Yeah. And then within the release process of our CI/CD pipeline, there's several things happening, and you can see it there on 1A. So first thing is, we have, as part of the release process, this file is scanned, and all the objects that you have mentioned in this file are being tagged in Snowflake with, in this case, One Ring sales, right? So the sales table, the countries table, and the orgs table, which lie in two different schemas, they will all be tagged with One Ring sales. Second of all, we tell Immuta, you are now going to manage access to these three objects. That is where you see in the middle data source in Immuta. So that's the left side of the equation solved, right? So we have tagged our data sources, and in Immuta we have the data sources with the tags on them, but that doesn't give access yet, yeah? Because no attribute on the user. So let's think about how do we get the user to now request to have that attribute One Ring sales on them, right? And again, you'll see this in 1B. Here, we are again leveraging our CI/CD pipeline, and we publish based on that file. We create an entry in our data catalog and in our data marketplace, which is, the one-stop shop for data consumers to go search for data products and request access. So let's look at the other half then. So you see here a screenshot from our Roche data marketplace. So as a data consumer, you would go into the marketplace, obviously search with, the relevant terms, do the discovery. And then when you take the decision that, yes, this is the data product, I want to shop for, you can see a small shopping icon on the top right, put it in the basket, you provide a business justification, and again, from there on, automation takes over. Yeah. So first of all, we do an API call, and we ask the data product owner for approval. Yeah. They can opt for auto-approval. We do have certain data products which contain non-sensitive data that are open to everybody in Roche. So there the approval is automated, but a lot of the data you cannot just, give free access. So the relevant data product owner will be asked for permission. If they decline, nothing happens. Yeah. So sure, in Immuta, we still got our data source that are tagged, no attributes on the user. Okay, we're good. no access provisioned. But if they do approve, you can see we then go to Immuta and now attach the attribute one ring sales to the user. And obviously you figured it out. That is now the very moment that the mathematical equation is solved. So Immuta goes down into Snowflake, creates a personalized Snowflake role for the user. And in that role, we're now going to have the select permission for the 3 tables we have mentioned earlier. And as last part of the workflow, we obviously inform the user, dear user, access has been granted. You can now go ahead and work with this data in Snowflake. So this is really, really powerful. And it's important to understand. So again, we came from, data product is a schema to now essentially a data product is a tag. So if somebody asks me today, how do you define the data product in Snowflake? For us, it's really through a tag because it provides us so much more flexibility than a schema, right? Because you might have teams, they want to have, maybe just 3 schemas, but define 10 data products. They can now easily do this. You want another data product, you just define another YAML file. And let's say you want to add or remove a table. It's all simply just done through that file. So you could also, for example, have the case, and we were asked for this a lot, I have 10 tables in my schema, but I only want to expose 3 to my business users, and 7 I want to hide. With the schema-based access, you couldn't do this. It was the schema, all or nothing, yeah? And now we really have access control on the table level. And just to also show some of the benefits, yeah? So all our teams at Roche leveraging our platform, and they now do no longer have to go through a ticketing system in order to get, a new data product set up. It's purely through their CI/CD release process. So maximum flexibility, eliminated a bottleneck completely. We were also able to, and we're still in the process of cleaning up those old roles, the schema-based roles, but we were already able to get rid of around 94% of groups that we before had to maintain, because with role-based access, you might know for each role you got to create a group and people get added to that group. So this also saved us a lot of time and effort, and it makes things easier for people. And last but not least, so I also talked about this real quick. So in our central platform team, we were able to free up 2 employees that used to have the job of creating these schemas, roles, etc. And we are now leveraging them to further automate and create new services on the platform. But thank you all so much for being here today and for listening to us.